Hello everyone, how are you? I'm Ari Theriger and today I'm going to talk about religion, cult and ritual. General and very quick explanations to understand the differences and similarities between these three expressions of human action to meet the need to be in contact with an abstract meaning and turn it into a purpose. Of course, trying to explain all of this to you according to my own understanding of all of this. In historical terms, of course, of expressions of faith, practical terms as well, and also in terms of the natural human behavior and impulse towards perceived belief. This is our very first video of October of 2020, a very crazy year, but I promise you this year is just the training camp for what's to come, especially for the year of 2028. That was very cheerful. Anyway, this is a video that came out on a Sunday, which is unusual in this channel, as I always upload videos on Wednesdays, but well, occasionally I like to make special videos on Sundays, and it's almost always during October, since, at least to me, it's a very special time of the year. It brings great mystical memories to me, and indeed magic is in the air. So today I'll have for you a very short video, I think, but it may contain useful information, I hope. Now, those of you who have been here for some time, you have probably noticed on my YouTube videos that I often mention cult when referring to some form of worship, or better still, referring to expressions of faith within pre-Christian Scandinavian societies. Rightly so, a patron asked me this question: what is my understanding on the differences between religion and cult, and why I speak about cults and not religions when it comes to past civilizations, but especially and mostly when I'm referring to expressions of faith in Old Norse pre-Christian religious contexts. I have already made a video precisely on the common misconceptions concerning Old Norse religion, and you can see it right here if you have the time. And that's one of our first problems, actually, because in pre-Christian Scandinavia there was no such thing as a religion, an official religion. It wasn't like ancient classical period where you had the religion of the state and then a variety of religions and cults and belief systems apart from the religion of the state. In pre-Christian Scandinavia, not everyone worshipped the same either. And we must not forget that even in civilizations with a specific religion of the state as a means of political and social control, not everyone was subscribed to the same either. And in more remote areas is precisely where we find different expressions of faith, mostly with animistic traits and mostly cults. So I shall explain this. In any case, if you have the time, obviously watch the video I have recommended in this right upper corner concerning the misconceptions about Old Norse religion, as well as this one appearing right here, right now, speaking precisely about the fact that not everyone in pre-Christian Scandinavia worshipped the exact same thing. And that's when we enter in the cultic panorama. Of course, there are cults within religion, but also cults that follow a specific system of belief that does not belong in a religion, but rather to a broader supernatural belief, and that's the point of this video, to try to explain the differences in general terms. So, with no more delay, please, let's get started. In my honest opinion, religion is an institution which controls spirituality and has devotees, followers of the rules, dogmas and canons of a particular set. Religion is a set of rules, regulations and rituals originating from a specific theology which becomes an ideology. In the special case of pre-Christian Scandinavia, for instance, as an example, there was never a unique religion or an institution that controlled the religious panorama. In fact, there was no notion of religion at all, as religion is a structured belief system with specific expressions of faith towards a limited perception of the divine. Or indeed, religion is the result of turning into ideology a singular theological understanding. And it has a specific human religious element, whether an individual or group of individuals who are the representative authority of that religion, be those priests or priestesses, right? Whilst in cultures where a fixed religious structure doesn't exist, which was the case of the pre-Christian Scandinavian society, what people usually had is what we can call cultic leaders. That's probably the best term to define them, which are individuals who held cultic ceremonies, festivities, sacrifices, rituals. Their primary job wasn't being priests or priestesses. Their purpose in the society wasn't primarily or specifically a full dedication to the gods, to the divine, but instead they had other functions. Usually they were the social and military authority, members of the nobility and royalty even, the aristocracy. Their primary function wasn't a religious one, but being the aristocratic authority, certain things were expected of them, and that was the usual annual sacrifices to the divinities and to the spirits and the festivities and celebrations to ensure a successful outcome in the community. So they were not priests or priestesses as their vocation, but cultic leaders, the ones whom people expected to see a cultic expression of faith through ritual, as they were the authority. And so through them and through the rituals within the cultic practice, a beneficial outcome was given to the community from the supernatural panorama. In pre-Christian Scandinavia, in terms of religion, it was based on various cults. While religion in its basis, in its basic function, is to let the divine communicate with the followers by means of a religious authority, in cults it's the action of the human being that will make a connection with the divine. The individual or the group performs certain rituals, and through people a connection is made with the supernatural, through practical ritual. Which is why offerings and sacrifices existed, to communicate directly with the divine and the supernatural in general. Many cults didn't even require a fixed and well-structured priesthood. Many cults were domestic cults, private cults, and the head of the family or the community in general performed the rituals and the rites. Certainly there were priests and priestesses in many ancient civilizations, obviously, many of which were of noble and even royal social status, but there wasn't a specific institution that controlled religion in the great majority of ancient civilizations, nor everyone within ancient European cultures subscribed to the same beliefs. But if we turn to classical Roman, Hellenic, ancient Egyptian, even to Western Slavic cultures of the Middle Ages, we find specific individuals whose function was a full dedication to the divine, to the gods, as representatives of a religion of the state. Such cultures and civilizations had a religion of the state, a religion of the elite, whose function was to control the subjects through religion, through faith, as religion is without a doubt a means of political and social control. But in such ancient civilizations, in more remote areas, away from the scope of the authority of the centers of power or political centers mostly, people kept more primitive expressions of faith, closer to animistic worldviews. But anyway, as this channel is mostly about Viking Age and Scandinavian studies, let's return to that. In pre-Christian Scandinavia, a specific divinity had many cults. Not everyone subscribed to all the cults either. Certain people performed fertility cults to a certain deity, or battle magic to another deity. A cult is something more restricted to a smaller group or an individual who devotes his or her religious, spiritual, magical practices to a specific deity and with a specific purpose. While religion includes a whole pantheon or a single deity focused on the development of being in contact with the divine in general. And the curious aspect of expressions of faith in pre-Christian Scandinavia and such other cultures similar that it didn't have an official religion of the state is that the gods, the figures perceived to be or representative of the divine, were secondary in the expressions of faith. The great majority of the population was tied to the land, and their needs were different than the needs of those obviously living within the centers of power. And without a close and daily contact with the local authority, people were more inclined to keep older expressions of faith, which means since people were inserted in a different geographical, social and economic and even political reality closer to the natural surroundings, the natural world, their primary expressions of faith towards the supernatural panorama was precisely to the spirits of the land, to the supernatural entities of place, fertility cults, to the ancestors, to the Landveithir, whites, domestic spirits, the Vette, and so on and so forth. This isn't religion, this is cult. A cult is a specific human action directly trying to contact with the supernatural, instead of what happens in religion, which is through a religious authority that contact is made with the divine. But of course, it depends obviously on the religious background and culture. There are many sorts of cults, but when it comes to European ancient cults, things tended to be different due to the domestic cults, private worshipping, etc., which are expressions of faith not bound to the religious authority, but instead based on personal or familiar traditional rituals, not specifically towards a fixed and structured notion of divinities, but to a broader panorama of supernatural entities, where the gods are often placed in a second level, so to speak. And the primary function of the ritual is towards a variety of spiritual entities residing in the physical reality, within the land, the soils, the forests, mountains, the rivers, the very domestic environment, right? There are cults where freedom of thought is non-existing. It's true, obviously. When it comes to pre-Christian Scandinavia in the past, there is no real religion, and we must understand the spiritual panorama as a complex reality of various cults. In ancient Rome, likewise, but there were official religions and unofficial religions, and loads of cults, both public and domestic, and it highly depended on those performing such cults. What I mean with this is that a cult differs a lot from a religion in its foundations, laws, dogmas, rules, canons, etc. Now, whatever people do in a cult, that's another matter. Cultic leaders can become as close-minded and with a tyrant personality as much as religious leaders, obviously. In cults, rituals are fundamental, whilst in religions, prayer is the key to the divine. In cults, people are the central figure, be that the members or the cultic leaders, but it's through the human component that the ritual develops, while in a religion the individual doesn't really matter, or at least the human figure as the exercising force to reach the divine doesn't really matter. In a religion, it's the contact with the divine that is much more important, and solely to obtain something from the divine through a religious authority. In a cult, it's the actions of a person in ritual that person obtains what that person wants without the need to contact the divine. In pagan cults, it's through offerings, sacrifices, gifts that we give something of ourselves to be able to receive something else, be that from the divine, nature, ancestors, spirits, etc. But when it comes to the conduct within a cult, that differs from cult to cult. It's precisely the nature of the cult that allows people to have the freedom to approach the members in whatever way they want, while in a religion, the followers have no real intervention in the structure of the religion. Religion is fixed, and the follower has no intervention, save praying to the divinity, expecting something in return. Whilst in a cult, the ritual is fundamental, and the participation in ritual from the part of the members to have a direct contact with the supernatural, a physical action by themselves and not by a religious authority that does the ritual while the followers watch. A cult is much more practical in its expression of faith, which allows the individual to express a unique behavior according to the specific necessity or wish, while in a religion the individual has no real practical function and instead follows a collective ideology. Just take the simple example I can give you right now to better understand this reality, I hope. Let's pretend there was a religion around Odin, which means there would be a lot of followers. The religion would be something controlled by the state and by a religious authority and would rapidly spread. Sooner or later, to keep everyone within a controlled society, the religion of Odin would be practiced by everyone, or at least included in their religious lives, because it was the official religion of the state, country or nation. It was mandatory. Within this religion, the main god was Odin and Odin alone, and the religious practices were made according to the rules stipulated by the priests who controlled the religion. Whilst a cult to Odin would be something for certain members of the society, something a lot more individual rather than collective following. Some would have private cults to Odin related to death, others to war, others to rune magic, and so on and so forth. And this creates an expression of faith a lot more fluent. There would be a certain freedom of expression of faith in the cult, because unlike in religion, that people would specifically pray to Odin and have a general unspecified devotion to Odin alone, simply focusing on the figure of Odin as the sole benefactor of that religion, in a cult to Odin, people would physically do and participate in a ritual towards a specific aspect linked to Odin, a specific action to meet a specific purpose related to Odin, and if need be, the next week the aim within the cult of Odin would change and people would seek some other aspect or would not even have the need to express worship to Odin again, because it wasn't mandatory. It wasn't a religion, so people would change devotion daily according to the necessity or wish of the moment. And because there were various cults to Odin, there were various cults to other deities. And many people didn't have the need to focus or to be bound solely on the figure of Odin. They could just focus on other deities and worship in whichever way they deemed useful for their own lives and daily affairs, as well as their needs and position within the society. This, hypothetically speaking, of course, because as you know it, and as said before, in pre-Christian Scandinavia, the gods were known, but most people had cultic practices towards various spiritual entities, a broader spiritual panorama outside the scope of the divine. And through ritual, they would express not only faith, but trying to create a symbiotic relationship with such spiritual entities for the benefit of the whole and for the survival of the human being, in an attempt to ensure the continuation of being inserted in the spiritual panorama for a beneficial outcome. As another example, the same goes to Freya. Cults involving fertility magic, war cults, battle magic, love charms, cat cults, death cults, etc. Different specific cults to Freya, when the necessity is something towards an aspect governed by that deity, and not a general devotion towards a deity, towards Freya, a general unspecified devotion. So not a religion of Freya, which would mean that Freya would be the key and unique religious element of that expression of faith, but instead what would happen in the past, in pre-Christian Scandinavia, were a series of cults towards Freya and towards all the other gods, obviously. This is the thing with paganism. It isn't a religion, but a vast variety of cults and several belief systems entwined, entangled, in an attempt to create a symbiotic relationship with our surroundings. It's impossible to make a religion out of any pagan spirituality due to the complexity of each cult and the different approaches to each deity, to each spiritual entity, the private cults, the domestic cults, the celebrations, festivities, rituals, and every possible cult you can imagine. It's impossible to put it all within a religion because no one can comprise the tremendous variety of belief systems that existed in the past. The variety is too great, too extensive, a multitude of beliefs and spiritual paths that form a patchwork blanket, or better still, a tapestry of a multitude of realities that are the pure representation of the concept of Weird and Urlog, fate and destiny of Norse spiritual beliefs, a never-ending web connecting it all. As I was saying, a pagan religion simply doesn't exist. A neo-pagan religious construction exists, just like Ásatrú, which is but a frame or a little branch of Northern European pagan traditions. Ásatrú can be called a neo-pagan religious construction or neo-pagan religious manifestation, because it doesn't involve every possible religious and spiritual reality of Northern European and Germanic pagan traditions of the past. It only focuses on certain subjects. It only chooses specific aspects to fit into a modern ideology constructed from a theological understanding. And indeed, Ásatrú is a religion because it forms an organization which, through similar concepts, tries to gather members and bring them into a common expression of faith and a single understanding of the divine and the supernatural. Ásatrú is a religious ideology of our modern times based on some aspects of ancient Nordic and Germanic beliefs. Now, it's also important to retain that in pre-Christian Scandinavia, religion/cult and magic was together and not separated as we have in many monotheistic religions, mostly Abrahamic ones, but also non-Abrahamic such as Zoroastrianism and some neo-paganisms. In 98% of the cases, it's impossible to separate religion and magic in pre-Christian Scandinavian context. Archaeologically speaking, religion and magic walked hand in hand in the great majority of contexts and subjects of pagan belief systems of the past. This is when ritual comes in. Please, pay close attention. And I mean ritual in here as the action to express faith, solely. Magic involved the belief that humans, through their rituals, could directly control natural forces or magical essence, that which we often label as black magic or white magic, which, as you know it, in my belief, there are no such things as white magic or black magic. Only power we harness or capture through sorcery or rituals, or in other words, through direct action, and then we give it a purpose. But that's something for another time, doesn't matter now. It's important to understand the concept of ritual as an action to express faith, because that belongs in a cult and not in religion per se. Because religion is the belief in the divine power that may or may not intervene in our affairs if we ask for it, if we supplicate or pray, worship, venerate, or any other kind of interaction with the divine which requires waiting for the divine to act on our behalf. Whilst in a cult and through ritual, we actively take action in order to do things, to acquire something, and that often comes with the use of magical arts, to actively have control over a certain force and bend it to our will. We have employed ritual as a means of expressing our involvement in the powers of the universe, as a means of gaining contact with those powers and of causing them to manifest themselves to us. This is ritual, and this belongs in a cult. This doesn't mean that ritual isn't possible in religion. It is, but religion controls. And the purpose of the ritual in religion is to call upon the divine, not by the individual, but by the religious authority. While the purpose of the ritual in cults is to catch the powers residing in existence itself and using them to manifest our desires. As I have said before, and perhaps this will be easier to understand by my next few words, I hope, by the observance of the behavior of all things in the natural world and everything that surrounds us, including life itself, we perceive meaning, and with meaning we understand and know how to act, how to create meaning of our own and affect our surroundings and affect our own lives. This is also the basis of sorcery, witchcraft, divination methods, magical arts of all sorts. It is the search of meaning and project our consciousness towards that meaning to affect and cause effect, or alteration and influence to achieve or to cause. As I said before on the video about animism and magic, if I'm not mistaken, magic is the result of our interaction with the supernatural through ritual. But ritual can only be performed properly by the knowledge we have of the meaning that was observed. And the meaning is the manifestation of the consciousness of the supernatural towards our own consciousness. So ritual can be any action we physically and directly perform to create a concrete connection according to the perceptible meaning. Ritual doesn't necessarily have to belong to a religion or to a cult, although it is often found within a cult. Ritual constitutes a series of actions upon perceiving a meaning and trying to turn that abstract meaning into a concrete purpose that leads to a direct symbiotic connection with that meaning. Ritualization is a fundamental feature of animal behavior and contributes to evolutionary process, because upon perceiving meaning, we act, and we continue to act in that way in order to maintain the contact with the meaning that was perceived and to keep understanding it better. And as such, we create ritual as a connection. And ritual is the basis of the evolution of the mind, and therefore the basis of every expression of faith. Because to understand the supernatural, we must find a meaning. And once we find it, we create ritual to continue to maintain the connection and to achieve a better understanding by the consecutive actions within the ritual. So perhaps this is one of the main reasons why ritual is rare in religion, because religion is a structured and fixed organization that aims towards social and political control of the masses. Therefore, an individual expression of faith is not allowed in religion, and instead there is a collective consciousness towards a fixed perception of the spiritual, which means religion does not allow evolution of thought, because that will directly affect the very purpose of religion, which is control. Ritual is evolution, it is transformation. Change is natural, everything changes. As you can see it, the seasons come and go, and life emerges and dies and is recreated and recycled. Everything in nature changes, and the human being as an element within the cycle of nature also changes, obviously. The primary purpose of ritual is transformation, and transformation leads to change. Ritual provokes transformation of the thought, because with every ritualistic action towards a perceived meaning, we gain more information, more contact, new perceptions, new insights. We delve deeper and we find other meanings. And other forms of ritual towards those new meanings are required, and it's a never-ending process of evolution. Ritual has no great purpose in religion, because within religion, ritual will be transformed into meaningless actions, futile efforts, because it is inserted into something fixed, cannot be changed. And ritual in religion will only serve to maintain the same mental structure towards a single perception of the supernatural. Therefore, no evolution of the mental structure. Again, ritual is made according to the knowledge we have of the meaning that was observed. And by the observance of the behavior of all things in the natural world, we perceive meaning. And with meaning, we understand and know how to act, how to create meaning of our own, to affect our surroundings and affect our lives, to achieve transformation and therefore evolution of thought, because inevitably with meaning we find more meaning, and therefore new actions are required to understand the experienced meaning. Therefore we create ritual. Alright, my dear friends, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video and I hope it was useful. I hope this October will be a very interesting month. I promise you it will be a very interesting month, at least in this channel. Stick around. So once again, thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. And as always, tack för idag.